Sekeres Price for Wednesday, July 31st, 2024. We're coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. And if you're thinking of hosting a company party, give the Wall Center sales team a call. They'll walk you through it all, the glorious space here, 604-331-1000. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Jacob Lazar hitting switches, conducting things. We've got a big program coming up for you. And we're going to start with some Vancouver Canucks talk, Blake, because, we got into it on Monday. You were away last week following the signing of Daniel Sprong. And we've mentioned when you look at this team up and down the lineup, it looks like there's a lot of goals there. 11 guys who hit 14 or more last season. So we're asking, will the Canucks score more goals than they did last season? Yes or no? You can vote at Sekeres Price at our X.com or YouTube accounts. And just for some context, 279 goals last year. That finished sixth in the National Hockey League. I mean, it was an incredible first half that floated that total, but only Tampa, Edmonton, Dallas, Toronto, and Colorado scored more goals than the Vancouver Canucks last year. In fact, Vancouver had one more goal than the President's Trophy winning New York Rangers. So where'd you arrive on the poll?
The answer is no, but it's not because it necessarily means that they will not score a lot of goals. The problem with this question, or asking this question and not looking deeper, is how the Canucks spread out their scoring, which is to say they front end loaded it. On December the 23rd, as the Christmas break begins for all clubs in the National Hockey League, the Vancouver Canucks had 135 goals in just the 35 games they had played. Remember, that's not the halfway point officially.
No.
135 in 35, and they finished with 279, you said?
279, yes, sir.
So they're basically at the halfway mark of their goal scoring.
Yep. So it was
with 47 games left to play.
Right. So it was 135 in the first 35, and then it was 144 in the next 47.
Right. So
if my math is right, and that's always a dangerous place. But
so I think they're more likely to be, and there's going to be ebbs and flows to any team, but that is a very shocking division there. At that point, by the way, they were in first place for goals for in the NHL by 10 already at that point. 10 more goals than the Colorado Avalanche at that point. 13 more than third place Vegas Golden Knights at that point. So they were running away with the goal scoring lead at that point. And of course, we know what happened, and the goals started to dry up. I think what they've done in bolstering the wings here, Matt, is they've given themselves insurance, and they're still going to have ebbs and flows, but they've given themselves insurance against the steep peaks and valleys that they had last year.
So the case for more goals pivots on more rush chances, which Rick Tocchet says he's committed to, more offensive creativity allowed, which Rick Tocchet says he's committed to, and perhaps even a improvement in the power play. It was 11th in the league last year at 22.7%. You could also argue they more than offset the number of goals that went out the door, at least in the forward ranks, particularly since Elias Lindholm wasn't a huge scorer here in Vancouver. The case against it is, well, number one, the shooting percentage and how high it was in those first 35 games when they potted 135 goals. And then secondly, of course, and we talked about this a lot at the end of last year, Blake, all of their best offensive players had perfect health last year. I mean, go up and down the column of games played for Vancouver Canucks players last year. Hughes, Pettersson, Garland, all at 82. Miller, Besser, Roenick, all at 81. Höglander, 80. So they were the beneficiary of having their best offensive players on the ice pretty much at all times.
Yeah, they eventually did dispel the you're having a perfectly healthy season when Demko and Joshua went down, but you're right in terms of the true offensive generators. Like they
Yeah.
didn't have to overcome much.
Right. So I workshopped this, and uh, accounting for, baking in, if you will, some man games lost for the top offensive players. So follow along here. I gave Besser, Miller, and Pettersson all 30 goals apiece. Now, Besser last year, as we know, went for 40. Miller went for 37. Petey had 34. So you can look at it on the surface and say, hey, Sekeres, you're shortchanging that group 20-some goals. Fair enough. But again, are they all going to be perfectly healthy all year? I gave 25 goals to Jake DeBrusk, Blake.
Yep.
He had 19 last year, so I've given him 6 more. I gave 20 goals to Niels Höglander, Dakota Joshua, Connor Garland, and Quinn Hughes. Now, I robbed a little bit from Höglander. He had 24 last year. Garland hit 20 right on the number. Joshua hit 18, but as you mentioned, missed 20 games or 19 games. Hughes hit 17. So I was perhaps a little too conservative with the 3 top forwards. I was probably a little generous with that next group of scores. Then I gave Sprong and Heinen 15 apiece, and I just gave P.F. Suter his 14 goals that he had last year. So add all that up, I get to 239 goals from 10 forwards and their top defensemen, which means to exceed 279, they would need 41 goals from a group, the rest of the roster, Bluger, Sherwood, Podkolzin, Oman, amongst the forwards, Roenick, Susie, Myers, Forbert, Desharnais, Juleson. Blake, that group combined for 33 goals last season. So I'm leaning no on the poll question. 8 more goals for that group would be a lot. The health of the hockey club, I think, it almost has only one way to go in terms of the regular season. I know they were hit by injury in the playoff.
But you were very conservative with some of the other role players. I mean, I
don't
know. You almost convinced me of yes now. I
Really?
was no, and you almost convinced me of yes.
Well, who do you think I'm conservative on? Joshua, he had 18 last year. I'm giving him 20.
Who did you give 15 to at the end there?
Sprong and Heinen.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't. I think one of those guys beats 15.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And I think
it's wonder. Yeah, So Sprong's hit 15 twice in his career, the last 2 years, 18 and 21. So yeah, maybe I was a little conservative in that regard. Heinen at 15 he's hit it 3 times.
So here's my thing: when we make these calculations, one or many of these guys are going to be put into situations that they haven't normally been put into, because of the Canucks. They're going to need these guys to play top 6 minutes. They're going to need these guys to periodically play PP1, certainly PP2. So like Sherwood, who knows what Sherwood looks like on PP2? And we're not asking guys to score 21 goals.
No, he had 10. Sherwood had 10 last year. He could easily have 15 if in fact he plays PP2. Yep.
So it's that incremental. Right?
Podkolzin, that's only got one way to go.
And then we keep waiting for all the guys at the very bottom of the roster that you talked about, the Podkolzins and others that, if any one of those guys happens to say this is the year I'm blossoming, then you get a big boost.
All right. Well, many different ways to slice it.
Yeah.
And as I said, it was governed by conservative predicting on the high end of things. And if you say I was also a little conservative with the middle and bottom part of the roster, so be it. But I think 279 and being 6th in the league, in totality, it's kind of like what they say about on the golf course, Blake. What did you shoot? You had an incredible front 9 and a terrible back 9. It still adds up to whatever it adds up. And last year was a very good year for the Vancouver Canucks when it comes to goal scoring. Just before we move on to some of these incredible Olympic stories that are going on for Canada at the Paris Games. The other thing that we had a good debate about last week when Irf Gaffar was in for you is Rick Tockett's comments to Thomas Rance on The Athletic with regards to striking that balance. Okay, he wants to generate more rush chances. He wants to allow for more offensive creativity. By logical extension, that should create more opportunities on the goal, more shots on the goal, more shot attempts. Also means they'll be giving up possession more frequently than they did in the offensive zone this coming year if it comes to pass. Where are you on striking the balance and perhaps the risks involved with Coach Tocchet, going Tocchet 2.0 and perhaps getting away from some of the defensive staples that really, for my money, underpinned the team's success last year?
See, the blue line is not as good as it was. But it's also not as good as it was, I think, in a defensive way. Like, it's not like they went with a bunch of Tyson Berries and Justin Schultzes of the world that will ultimately help the offense. And you're thinking, okay, yeah, they're going to be a little bit more defensively liable, but they're going to probably score a ton of goals. To me, they're kind of a watered down version of what they were last year. Same profiles of defensemen, but not as good versions of those defensemen. So what I'm going to be curious about is, A, are they reasonable facsimiles of the former guys that they can still be defensively sound? And B, do they have any lick of, Desharnais and Forbort are not Nikita Zadorov defensively or offensively. So if you're suffering in both regards, what does that mean for the Vancouver Canucks in totality? They are unabashedly better on the forward lines. And I think they're going to be able to be creative and be creative offensively. But, in the bid to have more goals off the rush, boy, they're going to have to convince me that guys like Forbort and Desharnais can make first passes. They get that rush going, because right now I can't, in my mind's eye, I can't make that movie. I'm not Francis Ford Coppola here. I'm incapable of creating a movie where all of a sudden Desharnais is in stride, whipping beautiful cross ice passes to get the rush going in the right direction here.
Hey, they said they thought his next payday would be the big one. They said they thought they could work with him and turn him into.
And if he makes those passes, yeah, they're right.
For sure. As we know, he's a late bloomer. He's a late 20s guy who's played a very few number of NHL games. Big defensemen oftentimes take longer, much like the power forwards, to develop and acclimatize to the National Hockey League. I just absolutely love covering Rick Tocchet because of the way he brings you into the conversation, not to mention, how much he explains his coaching and how much he understands the profession at large. Because look, like, I commend him in a massive way for a few things that he has talked about from that year-end press conference and what little we've heard of him in the summer. Number one, that, you do have to freshen your message for the players, right? There are certain things, staples, if you will. There are certain things that are fundamental, but you should come back with a fresh message, a fresh theme for the player. Number two, you should evolve as a head coach, do some professional development, particularly given the specific talents in your charge. And I think we've heard him talk about that when he's talking about more rush chances, more creativity, allowing guys like Pettersson and others to toe drag once they reach the blue line. And of course, creating more shots, which he was pushing back against the notion that they weren't shooting the puck enough in the postseason. But with the benefit of hindsight, with the benefit of being able to go back and watch the games, he is a little more amenable to that sort of hockey going forward. And yet, what he did last year was one of the all-time great coaching jobs that I've seen in any sport. Certainly that I've covered in 20 plus years in this business. And I do think there's a little bit of a risk of baby with the bathwater that, for the most part, what you did last year was hugely successful. Don't get away from those things just to prove that you can evolve as a coach, just to prove that you can have a fresh message for season 24-25.
Well, the good news is the roster is better offensively, and that's where you have more difficulty coaching. Not the collective you, not Rick Tocchet, anybody. You can't coach skill. You either have it or you don't. You can much easier to coach an offensive guy to play a little bit of defense.
Mhm.
Now, some guys just some guys aren't going to get it, but that has been a far more successful precedent set for coaches than the other way around.
For sure.
So,
I mean, that's the essence of the task. You can't go out and win the game for the players because you're not shooting, you're not scoring. What you can do is minimize the ways of losing. That is often how coaches view themselves. That is why you see defensive-oriented, defensive posture from head coaches. And it's only once you get a good enough team to recognize the limitations of that you'll get coaches to move on to what is the next frontier. And that is, okay, how do I minimize my team's ways to lose the game, but also create environment and allow them to do what they do, to go out and actively be agents and win hockey games, even if it's not necessarily game in, game out, exactly how I'd like to see it based on what we coach, defensive structure, defensive system.
they also just need to make sure they score the goals. So they've got all the promise of scoring goals. And, it's one thing to throttle back, but if they've created this team and this team as it stands still looking like the same level of production as the end of last year, I'm going to bet you are no further ahead, and that they'll have a tougher time winning games in the first half of this year than they were in the second half of last year, because I don't think they're as good defensively. So, you got your goaltender back. I guess that mitigates some of that. But my point is in order for all of this to play out as they hope it will, this improved looking offense on paper needs to be improved in actuality on the ice.
Let's move on here to our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, Yellow Dog Spirits, and Foolish Winery. Appeal dismissed, so it's do or die for the Canadian women's soccer team at the Paris Olympics. A win against Colombia, which gets going here in a little bit, puts them through to the knockout stage. They were denied in their appeal this morning, and for either a restoration of points, remember they were docked 6, or a partial restoration of points. Blake, the Court of Arbitration for Sports, has basically kicked the ball back to Soccer Canada and the Canadian women's team and said, nope, you're going to have to live with this. It's going to be up to you to overcome that deduction. And honestly, Blake, perhaps I'm cynical. There's part of me that wonders whether Canada went into this decision at something less than 2-0 and on 6 points, or conventionally 6 points, whether they would have gotten such harsh treatment. There was absolutely a case to make that New Zealand had been injured here with the spying, that the deduction of those 3 points was legitimate. There was less of a case when it came to the game against France. And I do wonder if they had lost to France, Blake, whether we would have been looking at a different decision here from the court and a partial restoration of points, 3 instead of 6, had the Canadians not gone into this game with destiny in their hands and the ability to make the knockout round with a win.
It's a great point. And ultimately, even if all that played out, they'd be basically still in this very same spot, right? Because they'd have the 3 points. In fact, they might be a little bit worse off, because if they're 1-1, but the suspension is down to 3 points, France gets their 3 points. So they're in worse shape. France gets elevated, right?
Fair.
So you're probably in worse shape. This is probably the better of those two scenarios, because you keep France down.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just up to you, the players, to go out and win the match. And you wonder about the leadership. You wonder about, the coaching staff as it remains right now, because most of the key players, key coaches, of course, have been dismissed from the game. So it's a skeletal staff that remains. You wonder about game planning and what that looks like. Are they effectively playing schoolyard soccer out there and trying to win an Olympic medal? In some ways, we might look back on this as a bit of an experiment on the impact of coaching at high levels here, because if they have some success kind of going rogue and on their own, what does that say about coaching otherwise?
Yeah. Put it this way, if those players wanted to forge, and we talk about this all the time, an us against the world mantra, all the evidence is there for them to come to that conclusion and compete the rest of the games under that banner. Tell us what's up with our friends at Yellow Dog, Blake.
There's some fabulous new offerings that really should be tasted to be believed, like the Lake Monster West Coast IPA. Neighborhoods released the Lake Monster, and it has something lurking beneath the surface. It's light and crispy, yet loaded with strata and citra hops. It's on tap and ready to go in the tasting room and available in select locations across BC. So look for it. The Lake Monster West Coast IPA. I can't wait to be drinking some of that in September.
Yeah.
We're up in Penticton.
Well, really what's come of this story now is some extraordinary words and conclusions, the likes of which you wouldn't typically hear without a scandal of this order. Canada Soccer has put in print and says it believes the use of drones to survey opponents all traces back to TFC head coach John Herdman, of course, a former coach of the men's and women's national team for teams for Soccer Canada. Quote, "This was a practice started by one person, John Herdman, and continued by Bev Priestman. Canada Soccer has begun its own independent review, initially focusing on this Paris 2024 incident. They have retained a law firm there in Toronto to look at this." And Rick Westhead reporting that FIFA got evidence of the Canadian spying program effectively the moment assistant coach Joey Lombardi was arrested by French police. He sung, like, it didn't take him long. He laid it all out for them. And disturbingly, part of what is now in the public view is an email from head coach Bev Priestman to Canada Soccer's human resources consultant, dated March 20th, 2024. So a few months ago, 4 months ago, asking for advice. The Priestman email says, quote, "Seeking your advice and input here regarding this formal email on spying. It's something the analyst has always done, and I know there is a whole operation on the men's side with regards to it. It can be the difference between winning and losing, and all the top 10 teams do it." That after an analyst refused to use the drone to spy on an opponent.
And we should clarify, too, that not only is Bev Priestman the successor to John Herdman on the women's side of the program, she's his protege. And I mean, professionally here.
That's right. They're from the same town, or at least the same region there in northern England.
So she has followed in his footsteps, not only by job position, but just in his way. So all of that tracks. None of it surprises a single person that hears it, as long as you know some of that backstory, and that they share common practices and always had in their time with Canada Soccer. So yeah, again, no jaws on the floor here whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
My biggest curiosity is how this now follows John Herdman, who is in a pretty prominent spot as the head coach of TFC, the biggest club, if not the best club, in Major League Soccer on the Canadian side of the border. And how much does this tarnish his legacy? Because as much as they fell flat at the World Cup, he got them to the World Cup. And that was, as we talked about at the time, accomplishment enough almost. Yeah. Did we want to see them score a goal? Sure. Did we want them to get a result? Yes, absolutely. But getting there was almost unthinkable a short time ago, and he got them there. And now we have to look back at that experience and go, How did he get him there?
I struggle a little bit with he got them there. It was a golden generation of players who I think mostly got them there. The coaching staff does deserve some credit, although, albeit, we've come to learn some of that credit might have been by underhanded means. First of all, TFC has not been the best club in this country for some time. It's the two-time defending Canadian champion Vancouver Whitecaps FC, and they're in the final again. So we'll see. Or they're on their way to the final. They still have this second leg semi against Pacific. It's funny, Blake, because I think pretty much all of the country was on board with John Herdman when he coached the women to that incredible bronze medal in London. And of course, remember, we got screwed over by that Norwegian official in the semi against the U.S. Also, because of what you outlined, the march to the World Cup and just how awesome the team played in romping through CONCACAF, which
beating
is
the U.S., beating Mexico.
Not things we had seen before. I told you a year ago, December, he lost me at the World Cup, not just with tactics, but with comportment and the now we got to go fuck Croatia idiocy that he articulated in the aftermath of losing that game to Belgium. I thought it was a stain on Canada soccer. I don't particularly want our coaches talking like that about other nations in international sporting competitions. He also, I think, has made some enemies here, Blake. And, you and I know some people in the game who were sort of gleeful at the Canadian Copa performance. And I think you can argue that the Copa performance ranks right there with the World Cup qualifying performance. Maybe not quite as good, but there were a lot of people gleeful about that because they could credit Jesse Marsh atop that program, and maybe that detracts a little bit from John Herdman. But yeah, I think we're coming to a moment here, my friend. Keith Pelly is now running Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, new on the job. They let go Bill Manning, who had oversight on TFC and the Argos. And TFC is on a playoff spot for MLS East, but by no means at the level that they were accustomed to back not long ago when they were a contender to win.
The only reason they're in a playoff spot is because of how bad the bottom of the Eastern Conference is. Yeah.
I wonder if we're looking at the final chapter here of a guy who I think still deserves credit for being a Canadian soccer builder and pushing at least the women's program, if not the men's program, forward from their station. And it was long, long overdue. But a Shakespearean tragedy here in terms of him leaving this country in disgrace because of this spying scandal.
To your point about the Copa stuff, and this is before this Olympic scandal, folks, I certainly received, and I think you did a little bit too, Matt, the amount of different people texting me their glee in seeing John Herdman struggle or the program succeed in his absence.
Yes, more of the latter.
It was pretty pronounced. Like there is not unanimous acclaim for his stand there, for his time there.
John's a cocky guy. He's a confident guy. I think he rubbed some people the wrong way. I think there was also some jealousy and envy that he was this sought after, public speaker who booked all these events and charged all these high fees to go.
He was deified for a bit there.
He was. And frankly, there was a time I was all in with him as a communicator, as a marketer, as a salesman, as a coach. But the curtain has been drawn back here. Mm-hmm. And there's some stuff that is difficult for, I think, even the most ardent Canadian soccer supporter to get behind.
And it makes me think of Jesse Marsh's press conference at Copa, where he was talking about how he frankly thought that tournament was unprofessional in terms of how it was organized.
Yep.
That's the kind of comportment that you like to see.
Yep.
That, a guy looking for integrity, looking for fair play. Like when he was saying unprofessional, I think he was thinking to himself, we can overcome this, but there's a lot of other guys that have had to deal with some BS in this tournament.
Well, and you say integrity. How about Marsh being presented with this drone spying and saying, that's not what my coaching culture
we're not doing that.
We're not doing that. So the men's team is definitely in better hands here.
Yeah.
I think that's an easy conclusion to draw. And I got to say, I'm pulling for Coach Spence there as the interim. I mean, needless to say, a horrible position that he has been put into.
Yeah, for sure.
And look, we don't necessarily know his involvement with all this going forward, but for the moment, he's the leader. And, you know, the team itself played with a ferocity and an anger and a relentlessness against France in overcoming that 1-0 deficit, coming back and winning at the death. They'll play Colombia today with a chance to go to the quarterfinals. Vancouver's Julia Grosso is coming into the starting 11. So both BC ladies, Jordan Wheatmouth, Chilliwack, of course, and Grosso, will be part of the Canadian 11 starting this match. Speaking of big matches, no less of a rugby authority than Patrick Johnston, Blake, told me as that game kicked off yesterday, the single biggest rugby sevens match in Canadian history. Now, our women's program did play England in 15s at a World Cup final way back 10 years ago. But when it comes to rugby sevens, yesterday against New Zealand was the biggest match in the history of the program, either men's or ladies. Exhilarating first half.
Oh,
so unbelievable. After falling behind to New Zealand, the Canadians with two magnificent tries from distance, and you're getting really excited. And I'm texting PJ going, this has all the elements. It's a thrilling game. It's a potential upset. It could go down to the wire against the world number one. It was all there for the Canadians in the second half. Alas, they weren't able to overcome. So it's a silver medal for what was a young roster that not many people expected to vie for a medal in Paris. Congratulations to the Canadian women's rugby sevens team for what was a spectacular performance at these games, which included beating the host French, who are an excellent side in this sport as well.
I had a room full, literally 6, 7 teenage girls, and all watching around the TV as my daughters had friends over. And so I was explaining sort of what the stakes were. And literally the ball's being kicked off at the start of that match. And I said, this could be ugly, guys. Great for them to get here. This could be ugly. And then they scored that first try. And I thought, and then I could hear some, they're probably going to kick our butts. And then, of course, we had to stay in our seats right until the very final minutes. And it's too bad as it ends on a turnover. And they
I texted Patrick about that too. It's one thing to be able to waste time with a running clock, but to be able to do it in what is such a short game anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And to be able to end the match by taking the ball and kicking it backwards out of play, that makes the NFL kneel down look exciting. I wish there was a better way to account for the clock and maybe added time in that sport going forward. Anyways, congratulations to the players. I want to shout them because there's a lot of BC fingerprints on this team, Blake. 2 British Columbian players, Flo Simons from Vancouver, Caroline Crossley from Victoria, but also a number of the out-of-province players play their rugby here in BC. Asia Hogan Rochester from West Shore RFC, Fancy Bermudez also from West Shore, then Carissa Norston, Chrissy Scurfield, they're both at UVic, and Piper Logan at UBC. So a big effort in this program, a big result, and as mentioned, a lot of BC fingerprints, be it players or clubs, university, or otherwise involved here in forging this silver medal. Also looking pretty good on the tennis court.
Mm-hmm.
Canada's Felix Auger-Aliassime beats Daniil Medvedev, the Russian, who of course can't play under the Russian banner at these Olympics, for the first time ever in 8 meetings, Blake. He had never beaten Medvedev on tour, beats him 6-3, 7-6. A lot of frustration from the Russian at the end, who smashes his racket. So Felix is off to the quarters to face Norway's Kasper Ruud, the number 9 ranked player in the world, the number 6 seed at this tournament. And if he wins that match, he's through to a semi and will play for a medal one way or the other.
Yeah, very exciting stuff. Tennis is we had sort of downgraded our thoughts on tennis at these games because just a lot of underachievement in the last 12 to 18 months from our top tennis players, despite their promise, despite what they innately have inside of them, the results just haven't been there. So for Felix to try to use this as a springboard for maybe a renaissance year or a year that, we can sort of say that we thought was coming, this would be something else. So we'll see. Doubles does not look like it's tracking in the right direction, either in women's or in mixed, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah. Women's doubles is done. Gabby Dabrowski and Leila Fernandez, they lose, so they're out. Mixed doubles.
Battling as we speak live.
Dabrowski are on court. Yeah, if I'm not mistaken. So still a possibility there. Yeah. If Canada was going to exceed 24 medals, one in Tokyo, and I keep hearing that's the record, and fair enough. Canada did win 44 medals at the Los Angeles Games in 1984. Of course, that was boycotted by the Eastern Bloc countries. The Soviet Union, East Germany at the time were powerhouses. So a lot of context around that 44, but technically 24 isn't the record. But I keep hearing so if you're going to exceed 24 medals, it was difficult to get there without some contribution from the sports that were like maybe medals going in. So look, there was a maybe medal in the butterfly last night. In fact, maybe even beyond that, maybe even less than that. Ilya Karan winning that bronze in the butterfly last night. Didn't see a lot of people talking about him. Obviously, the fencing medal, first ever for Canada. Nobody expected a fencing medal of all places. So already you have seen some performances and medals earned from athletes and teams, rugby sevens, that maybe were, not necessarily expected, if not long shots, at least, not top 3 possibilities on the way in.
But we should probably have more medals in the pool by now. Like Maggie McNeil probably could have had 2 medals by this point.
Yeah. No, there's been some results there with the relay team as well. Yes. The freestyle relay team in the pool, Maggie McNeil. So some medals left on the board there. Others have been earned, and in some cases in surprising fashion. I'm also looking at that Bet365 over under 5.5 gold medals for Canada. There are 2 in the books here, very much pulling for the over there. Yeah. And there's a very good possibility, depending on the way the games go from here. Vancouver Whitecaps FC, aforementioned.
Crazy game.
Holy cow, you're not lying. So they're into LAFC, which, as we know, is one of the toughest places to BMO Field, as a matter of fact, down in Los Angeles, against one of the toughest, most glamorous sides in all of MLS. They open a 2-0 lead. They blow it late with our old friend Kai Kamara scoring, and then a goal at the death in added time. And then
seconds after Levante Johnson has a sitter that he inexplicably slides wide. Like it's a 3-1 game, and then all of a sudden, no, it's 2-2.
And then they go to penalties, and immediately to penalties, and I do like that element of Leagues Cup. And Canada goes 4 for 4. The LAFC misses 2 of their 4, and in fact, it was their 2 goal scorers in regulation time, including the former Whitecap Kai Kamara, who missed.
Yeah.
In penalties.
And I've always complained or compared Isaac Boehmer unfairly, perhaps, to Max Crepeau. Just I find their silhouette in net very similar. And he looked very Max Crepeau-esque as he dove across to make the save there on a Bogusz went over his Kamara he saved off of. Yeah. So they pull it out. They should have had 3 points. They get 2 points via the PK win. Which means they still do have to work. If they'd won it with the 3 points, they're through basically. But now they're going to.
He had already played a Leagues Cup match and had a victory, so that governed a little bit of what they put out there on the pitch, right?
It did. Yeah. It was a backup keeper, and there was a couple other pieces that they could have put in there to go all in on their lineup. And the Whitecaps, Andres Kubas started the day on the bench. They had other options as well. And of course, Yohei Takaoka did not make the start. It was Bomer. So there were other first teamers that were on the bench for the Whitecaps as well. But they get 2 valuable points. So now if they hold serve versus Tijuana on the weekend, and I would suspect that I think Bomer still might start that match. I think Bomer probably does. But I would bet that Andres Kubas plays the entirety of that match. So they'll probably look a little bit better right off the bat. So they should be able to win this match. Tijuana, by the way, is a mid-table match in Liga MX, so they're not a juggernaut.
Yeah, of course, no Ryan Gauld here for the Caps. Huge absence. Berhalter and Veselinovic with the goals. Berhalter scores again in penalties alongside Krylak, Raposo, and Laborda.
He only scores crackers, by the way, Berhalter.
Yeah, that's true. And of course, his goals per minute. And as you mentioned, a very busy week for the Canadian keeper, Isaac Bomer, who played the Wrexham game and then played this game. That's a good development and test. I was glad to see that as well, because how often has this guy played 2 games in 4 days?
Right. And I said, I wouldn't be surprised if he starts at home either. Yeah. I think that Vanny wants to get him some development minutes here. And yes, they care about Leagues Cup, but the priority is MLS Cup. So it's twofold. You're getting development for Bomer, but you're getting some rest for Yohei Takaoka. And both of those things are good.
Should also mention this because, look, Javane Brown had fallen out of favor. And while I'm not necessarily sure their hopes this year were going to pivot one way or the other on Brown, when he's good, he's really good. He brings a lot of pace from that right back position. When he's bad, he can infuriate you, but they lose him, and they lose him for nothing to Real Salt Lake, a team that's ahead of them in the Western Conference table and a team they still have to dangle with this season. So perhaps
couldn't orchestrate a trade. They tried like the Dickens to trade him. They couldn't find a partner. So they put him on waivers, claimed by RSL and signed. And
didn't you just give him away to an Eastern Conference team just so you don't have to contend with him?
Now, we should say one other development out of that Leagues Cup match. Bilal Halbouni was very good as a central defender for the Whitecaps, and he's been sparingly used. And in fact, he hasn't played a Major League Soccer match yet for the Whitecaps. He's played in Can Champs and the Wrexham game. Bilal Halbouni was pretty good, so they actually used Matias Laborda, who's been a very good central defender this season. They used him as a wingback, and he was pretty decent. So, that explains why they let go of Javane Brown, but still letting him go for nothing, a little bit concerning.
Yeah, I thought so. I thought so too, especially since he may have to play that guy. That would suck.
Now, there are reports, too, that the Colombian midfielder is going to be signing very shortly, Eddie Ocampo. So, right. So that looks like it'll get across the line. Is that going to be the only action of this summer transfer window? We'll see.
When did the window close, Blake?
It's complicated. If you're dealing with a Canadian team or an American team, you got a week left, effectively. But
it's an extended window for the Canadian teams to accommodate the CPL sides. And of course, you can always make Major League Soccer trades, right? So, but yes, time is ticking there.
Yeah.
Want to let everybody know that a Nation Gear summer sale is on right now. 20% off everything. Some exclusions apply. And if you spend $200, you get free shipping. So, time to gear up with Nation Gear. The office summer sale is on. It's on until August 6th, everybody. And again, if you spend $200, it will be free shipping. Head to nationgear.ca.
And no, you're not going to be out of your mind if you get there and there's no Sekeres Price gear this fall. We promise we'll be into the store. It's not available just yet, but the rest of Nation Gear, including Canucks Army stuff, is available right now.
Yep. Let's get to today's menu. It is brought to you by Greta. Greta, a fantastic spot to catch the game throughout the season. Quick walk, rink, or stadium. It's a go-to spot for food, drink, and fun. That arcade surrounds the entire bar and restaurant, and boy, is it popular. Make it a game night at Greta, 50 West Cordova, or at gretabar.com. Frank Corrado was on vacation last week. We caught up with him today. He played with Daniel Sprong. And so we get his full synopsis of the guy he knew, the teammate he knew, the way Sprong's career has gone here, and where Frankie sees him fitting in with these Vancouver Canucks. Also talk about Jake DeBrusk and his fit, not to mention what Rick Tocchet is talking about with opening up and loosening the reins a little bit. We also talked to Rob Willams, the national sports editor of the Daily Hive. He's got a update on the seats at Rogers Arena, plus some context to the ticket pricing that the Vancouver Canucks recently unveiled for this upcoming season. So that's all coming up here on the YouTube show and on the podcast. Blake, it is time for our Bet365 Bets of the Day. This segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres Price. I'm going to let you go first here, partner, because I got a little bit of an offbeat one from basketball.
Oh, I'm going basketball as well, and I'm gonna go for the bad guys, just because you can still bet on a Canadian win here, but of course, using the spread, bet on the bad guys. Spain plus 9.5. That's just a lot of points, and I think this is going to be a close game. I think Spain's going to bring it. I think Canada has let teams stay close these first two games. I think they've let teams be in it late. And I think that trend is going to continue. As much as I think Canada can still pull off the win here, I think it's going to be a 5 to 7 point win at best. So Spain plus 9.5 tomorrow morning.
You know, it's funny, just to pull back the curtain here, a little full transparency. Blake and I go in cold with our Bet365 bets of the day. But I was looking at the menu today and going, if I know Blake Price, he will be tempted by Spain plus 9.5. So I said, that's our pick, but let him go first. And if he does take Spain plus 9.5, I will add a wrinkle, Blake. You can take Spain plus 9.5 and over 168.5 on the total. I think you'll see some points here on Friday. That pays at plus 260. So I'll take Spain and the points and over 168.5, just so
Great
that
minds think alike.
Well, let's hope. Or there's somebody at home tracking us day to day and going, oh, these guys, no chance.
They don't know anything.
Canada minus 10. That's your Bet365 bets of the day. Open an account today with Bet365. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS when opening that account. Frank Corrado coming up next.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the net. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Happy hour on Sekeres Price. Today's beer of the day, Yellow Dog's Chase My Tail Pale Ale. Joined now by former Vancouver Canuck and TSN hockey analyst, Mr. Frank Corrado, who... Did you have something off the top today? You usually have something off the top, Frank. So if there's something you want to get off your chest or something, okay, or we just get straight in.
I actually wanted to know, like, are you a Blue Jays fan or are you a Mariners fan?
I'm a Blue Jays fan.
Okay. Blake?
I am a recovering Blue Jays fan. I was a Blue Jays fan for most of my life. I cannot bring myself to watch a single game this year, or really the Vladdy Bichette era. It's not been for me. It's not been for
Really?
me.
Okay. Well, yeah, I was like following the trade deadline yesterday, and it's like, round of applause. Great job. You did a great job. Also, you put yourself in that situation.
Exactly.
So yeah, it was bizarre to see some of the reactions, but I feel you when you say recovering Jays fan, because there was so much to be so excited about for such a long period of time. And now it feels like that's pretty far away. You never know with people in Vancouver, if they're Jays fans or they hate the Jays and they're Mariners fans. Like it's one or the
down
other.
the middle.
Yeah. Well, I'll say a few things. I am a Jays fan, but outside of the 3 times they play the Mariners all year, I have no grudge against the M's. I like to see them do well.
Yeah.
I think it's good for baseball in this community as well. The other thing I'll say is they call that a trade deadline. Frankie, it was a 2-hour show on ESPN leading up to the deadline.
Is that all
All
they
they
do?
all they talked about was trades. They didn't have any monkeys. They didn't have
Yeah,
Plinko. They didn't have
exactly.
any hijinks. It
Yeah.
was straight meat and potatoes trade deadline, like sketching out prospects and things like that. That's
Brutal.
not how you trade deadline,
I guess
bro.
I guess some people are very committed to it, very committed to their craft, and some people want the easy way out. I don't know. I don't know what to
Right.
tell you.
Anyways, prefer the way hockey does it, even when there's nothing going on, and Duthie and you lot have to pitter pat for
Yeah.
hours on end.
Yeah.
You played with Daniel Sprong. Tell us about the Daniel Sprong you know, Frank.
Yeah, so I played with him when it was his first year pro. And he, what's funny, like he had a little bit of NHL experience prior to that. Like I think he played games as either an 18 or a 19-year-old. So he got that taste right away. And I think you guys know what happens when you get that experience and then you sort of have this expectation of how things are supposed to be or what you're supposed to get. And I think early in his career, he may have got caught up in that a little bit, like I'm supposed to be at this point because I've done that and I got that opportunity. And so I played with him in the minors, and I think there was a little bit of an adjustment there, just kind of realizing like you still have to work on your game. No one's going to hand you things. You do have to earn it. And I actually caught up with him this year. The Red Wings were playing Montreal, and just talking to him before the game, like he just seems so different than he was as a young kid. Like I feel like the league has kind of humbled him a little bit, and I think he understands what he's all about, what his game is all about, how that maybe fits or doesn't fit. And give him credit, because he's had basically 3 good years in a row when it comes to goal scoring. But I feel like his mindset has definitely switched a little bit from when he was the young player who, wanted everything right away, to the guy now who really has to, take the 1-year deal, prove yourself, earn it, and then has to do it again, which, is probably, it's a pretty tough situation to be in for a guy that can score 20 goals on any given year.
Did he think
We've
he was
heard
better than he was? Is that what one of the issues was?
I would say not that he was better than he was, Blake. Like confidence was never an issue for him. Like we're talking about a guy that, on a 2-on-1 with Alex Ovechkin, he's got no problem looking him off and saying, I can snipe this one. Like confidence is not the issue. I just think early on, you're 18, you're 19, you're 20. And I was probably a victim of this as well. You just need to mature a little bit. Like mentally, you just need to mature a little bit. And I think, from talking to him this past year, I left that conversation thinking it's a very different guy than I knew when I was 20 years old. Like I think he has matured a lot, and I think he's going into a very good situation here, where he's got people that are familiar with him, his personality, where he's been, where his career arc has kind of taken him, and someone who probably understands in Rick Tocchet how to level with a player like that, and how to try and make the demands so that they're reasonable and attainable for a player who can give you a lot of offense with limited minutes. And that's something he's done basically the last few seasons, and how to get the most out of that guy. So I think as far as if you were looking around for good fits for Daniel Sprong in the NHL this year, Vancouver would have had to have been right near the top, just based on that familiarity with everyone involved.
Where are you putting him in the lineup? What line does that skill set work with best, do you think?
I know it's interesting because he's played lower in the lineup and he's scored goals. But then, you watch, you watch Detroit play last year, and I had to watch them a bunch towards the end of the year. And it's like Sprong's not out there because it's a close game. But a close game, you could also use a goal yourself, but you're looking for someone that can, kind of lock things down a little bit. So, he's one of those guys where he can get lost in the shuffle a little bit depending on the way the game is going. He's not an overly tenacious forechecker. He's not overly physical, but when he has the puck on his stick, He's ready to shoot it. He commands the puck a lot. I think his playmaking ability is probably a little bit underrated because we just, I kind of think of him, and I think other people just think of him as a shooter. And he can make plays as well. Um, you know, it's interesting because you always think about versatile players being the guys that are trustworthy and a little more reliable. In a different way, I would say that Sprong is versatile. I would say he's versatile because when you put him higher in the lineup, he's probably going to play with guys that can get him the puck a little bit more to get his shot off. But he's displayed over the last, I don't know, last year or whatever, that he doesn't have to be a top six player in order to give you a little bit of offense. So it's a different type of versatility than the standard guy that we think of that you just kind of peg up and down the lineup.
Where's his power play fit?
I would think it's a second unit power play player. And it's
Spot, Frankie?
probably
Like bumper spot, or where would you put him?
well, so that's like I don't mind him in the bumper spot because I feel like when he's there, it's a quick pass and it's back out or it's a shot. I wouldn't envision him being a guy who's rounding high on the half wall, attacking downhill, that you're going to entrust to kind of orchestrate the thing. Like I think he's going to be seen as the guy like, okay, the play is finishing, it's on his stick and it's on the net, or it's a quick little bump play, and then it's to the net. Like I don't think you're not kind of game planning through him. And to be honest with you, a player like that is probably pretty tailor made for a second power play unit because you have limited minutes anyways. And so when you do get on there, like the onus is on you guys to get a couple shots and create something of quality. So I could see him being a pretty dangerous bumper player. And you know what? Worst case scenario, if he is I don't know if he is a half wall one timer guy, like maybe you're not running things through his side, but if you can find him on the back door, or you can find him for a one timer, like there's a pretty threatening option there as well. I just don't think it goes through him. I think he's
Yeah.
the finishing piece on anything you're going to drop on the power play.
Look, we hear hasn't been Mr. Popularity in the room. Is that just the cockiness, or is there any sort of anything else at play? There's a confrontational. Is it, the laziness on the defensive side? Like what hasn't made him Mr. Popularity in rooms? Why has he bounced around?
It's
That's my question.
it's funny with Spronger. Like I think he's a really nice kid. Like he's nice, he's polite. I think when he was younger, there was a little bit of like I should be elsewhere. I should be in the NHL or the first line or the first power play. And I think as time goes on, or as time has gone on, I think he has ditched a lot of that along the way. And like we said, like we talk about it all the time, like the NHL humbles you. It is a very humbling experience playing in the NHL. So I don't know, like I don't know if he's going to come into Vancouver and he's going to be, Mr. Not Popular. I just think when you have that kind of attitude sometimes, especially when you're a younger guy, it can rub guys the wrong way, and maybe they get the wrong idea about you. And it's sometimes hard to communicate what you actually mean or what you actually feel in those types of situations. And he may have he may have put himself in those spots for sure, but he also may have been the victim of a little bit of that. But just going back to the conversation I had with him last year before one of the games, I left that conversation thinking, like, I haven't seen this kid probably hadn't seen him in 5-6 years at that point. And I was like, that it's a different sounding guy than when I played with when he was 20 years old. And I was happy to hear what I heard from him, even the tone of it. And I think he comes into Vancouver now where, he's had some pretty good years in a row. The contract, it's funny because you compare these contracts with what the analytics companies tell you players should get and what they actually get. And there's a pretty large discrepancy there. So that should tell you something, that, you're getting an opportunity here based on the fact that, you have good production. You're going to have some people that believe in you, but not everyone was willing to believe in you. So that should be humbling as well. And I think that, it's like when the coach plays you 25 minutes or the coach plays you 12 minutes. You kind of know where you stand. I think you can read into that a little bit if you're the player and understand, where things have been at for you. But like I said, good opportunity for him. And I think he has learned a lot along the way with his experiences.
Depending on health on any given night to start the season, the Canucks could have anywhere from 9 to 11 players in the lineup coming off of 15-goal seasons. So we're asking about offense for next year in our poll question. Can they score more goals? Or is there enough, guys that maybe peaked with career highs at 15, 16, 17 goals that, you're not going to get that out of them on the yearly? How do you see this going down? And also, we've talked about this too. The blue line is probably a little less talented than it was. And of course, having a good blue line helps to feed the offense.
And just for Frank's edification, they finished 6th in the league last year, Frank, with 279 goals.
I was gonna say, so they were 6th in the NHL last year. I don't know how much more they can score. Like I think if you're a top 5-6 team in the NHL, like that's really good. The thing that Vancouver had going for them last year is that a lot of these guys had bloated shooting percentages. They were scoring more than they ever had, and you can't bank on all these guys having career years every single year. Like it just doesn't work that way. You're going to get some kind of market correction. What I do think is more important for this team this year is that you're scoring the goals at the right time. Last year for the first half of the year, certain players like, Hronek was on fire. The team, it just felt like everything was going in, and all the conversation was about the PDO and how this is going to, change and correct itself. It did to a certain degree. I don't think it came crashing down the way people, expected it to. But, later in the season and leading into the playoffs, I think if you have a little bit of that mojo going where you're like, that's when you want things to be just kind of filtering in for you. Like you'll get by the first half of the season, first 2/3 of the season thinking, man, it's been a grind to score goals. But then if the floodgates kind of open up later on, like that'll do more for you than kind of having that earlier in the year. But I think if they're a top 10 team when it comes to goals for, and hopefully they're in that top 6 or 7 category again, I think that's exactly where they should be. And if they're improved from there, kudos to them, because they've obviously made some adjustments in the way they played and they found a little something. And Blake, to your point, not having the, same caliber of puck movers on the back end, like that could be something for sure. That's also why you brought in DeBrusk. It's also why you bring in Sprong. It's also why you have a Danton Heinen now playing lower in the lineup. And hopefully Brock Besser is the same Brock Besser, and JT Miller, and maybe Elias Pettersson, finds his form from 2 years ago where he's, a 100-point player. So, I think when you look at the players that had career years, the players that maybe have a little more to give, it might balance itself a little bit. And if everything goes well, they're right back to that, 6, 7, 5 area when it comes to goals for in the NHL.
Yeah. I'm not going to break it down with you in terms of how we see it and how everybody is scoring goals, but answer me this, because Talkett last week mused that he thought DeBrusk would be perfect for Miller and Besser, and then sort of caught himself and went, no, but I know I got to give Pettersson, better wingers this year. Let's just play that out for a second. What would you make of DeBrusk with Miller and Besser? And then trickle down, do you think Sprong would work with Pettersson?
Well, I think if Pettersson is going to be able to drive the bus a little bit more, which sounds crazy because we've talked about it so much of who he's, had to carry with him basically last year. If he can be a little more of a self-starter, then yes, I think Sprong would be a good fit there. You're going to have a guy that's inclined to shoot, and a guy in Pettersson who I think is, yes, inclined to shoot, but also is a very slick and kind of tricky playmaker. So I don't think it's a bad fit, Matt. It would be interesting though if DeBrusk finds a home with Miller and Besser, and that would feel like you're really loading up that line. And I don't mind it. then it depends who are you giving to Elias Pettersson. And is it Höglander? Is it Heinen? And what does that look like? Because like let's be honest. The third line last year with Garland, Bluger, and Joshua, I don't know if anyone had that on paper being, what it was. And it was a great line. Sometimes things just click and they work. And if DeBrusque goes up and has to play with Miller and Besser, and that's a really good line, and you find a little secret sauce with Sprong and Pedersen and, player X who maybe it's Höglander, maybe it's Heinen, I don't know, and it just works, then hey, it just works. Or maybe Dakota Joshua works there. I don't know. But that's the beautiful thing now about the way the lineup kind of is constructed, where you'll have some versatile pieces. You'll have some guys that can play higher, some guys that can play lower, and they should have a little more offensive firepower from some guys that can hopefully repeat that, six, best goals in the NHL last year.
I got one more question for you, my dude.
Just before we leave that,
Yep.
if you're putting DeBrusque with Miller and Besser, it's got to be the best line in hockey. Like for you to keep it together, like it's got to be performing every single night and looking scintillating, considering you're robbing Pettersson of that line.
Yes,
Like
it would have to be unbelievable. It would.
Yeah.
It would have to be what the with the
Bottom line.
McDavid, Hyman, whoever you have with them, Nugent Hopkins, like whoever. That's what we'd be talking about. We'd be talking about this line is on fire. These guys are getting 2 points a night. Like, and if it's not that, then you're taken away from what could be with Pettersson and DeBrusque. Unless, Blake, you do Pettersson and DeBrusque, and you're like, holy smokes, that's ugly, and it doesn't work. But I don't see that being the case. I think they're both very good players.
It would have to be like Lotto line, basically, or the
Yeah.
Twins and Burrows at that level. Lastly, and we absolutely love talking here, Frank, because he gives you the internal debate. He just lays it on out there, as he did with the Athletic and Thomas Drance last week. But talking about the Edmonton series, talking about watching it back, about how he's kicking himself about several opportunities, and then out and out musing about how he's got to loosen the reins somewhat this year. He's got to allow for offensive players to have more offensive creativity, particularly when they cross the blue line. Is there a risk here that he gets caught in between, that we take away the staples that made them so successful, and successful mostly because they played great team defense, held on to pucks, didn't give up much opportunity at the risk of rush chances? Is there a chance that the meter moves too far on the other side with Tocchet allowing some of this offensive creativity and looking to push the pace a little bit more and generate those rush chances?
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't think so because, worst case scenario, Matt, you can just tighten it back up and you know what it looks like. And you're going to get buy-in from you guys. And chances are, if you've had to do that, you see an issue, the players see an issue, the players feel an issue. And to be honest with you, like, players want to be coached. Players want to have success, and whatever is going to lead to that success, I think for the most part, guys will buy into that. But it is, when he says from the blue line in, and he's obviously talking about the offensive blue line in, that's where you got to let your creative guys like go to work. And you can give them, a couple principles, but you don't need to overcoach it from the blue line in. Like that's where it's all about feel. That's where a guy like Pettersson will feel, when a defender is going to reach his stick out and he can slide it underneath for a pop pass. Now, that player being in the right position for the pop pass, that's where a little bit of that, those principles have to come into place. But no, I agree. I agree with Tocchet. I don't think you need to overcoach that. Like the principles that kind of stick with you over the years in the offensive zone. And I was a defenseman, so obviously I was standing at the blue line most of the time. And as time went on, defensemen got more involved in the play offensively. Like we were told to move in off the blue line, not just stand there, where earlier on in my career, it was like, let's make the zone as big as we can. So defensemen feed on the blue line and go side to side. And that's about it. Let the forwards do the rest of the work. It doesn't work that way anymore. Now defensemen are getting more involved. But the things that the forwards always kind of had to keep in mind was the more you can change sides, the more you can have the puck change sides, the more you're going to spread out the D zone coverage. So now the D zone coverage, instead of making things small and contained and controlled to one side of the ice, now they got to move. And the more they move, the more there's an opportunity for them to mess it up, because now they got to get to a spot. Now they got to make a read. You're making them think, and you're making all five guys think at the same time. So now there's more of an opportunity there. The other thing, that's, principle or whatever that you're always going to have is you're going to have one guy basically in like that soft spot area, high slot. Some people call it the honey hole. It's just like a little, that's, the bumper position on the power play. Like, you will try and have a presence there a lot of the times. And that because that player, ultimately, if the puck gets turned over, he's going to be your first forward going back into your own zone. Outside of that, I mean, let these guys do what they do. You didn't tell the Sedin twins how to play in the offensive zone for obvious reasons. Guys like, Besser, Miller, Pedersen, DeBrusk, like these guys have done it for a long time. It's about feel. So outside of those, those few principles, I agree. Like let them do their thing. And if it does come to the point where it's getting sloppy or it doesn't look right, you can always kind of, tighten it up. But there's nothing wrong with giving guys a little more leash offensively.
Don't want Demko trying to pull off Dominic Hasek like saves those while going post to post on the regular either, right? So
also, yes, no kidding, and especially early in the year, like
yeah.
Demko last year, earlier in the year, Vancouver was giving up, high danger chances like crazy. And he kept them in it for a long time. And you know what, to talk it and the team's credit, as the season went on, those high danger chances became less and less. Like they really did a good job of kind of buttoning things up defensively. But earlier on in the year,
high danger chances for and against.
Yeah, exactly.
Everything plummeted.
Both ways.
Everything plummeted. We saw some really fun hockey last year, October through December.
Yeah.
And then
it went from
January
high danger to low danger very quickly.
Exactly. Well, we went from high event to low event.
Yeah.
In the course of one season, it was truly a tale of two halves.
Yeah.
And a Canucks season for the ages in one regard, but just a bizarro turn of events throughout the hockey club. Great stuff, Frank. Thank you for this, my dude. We'll catch up
All
soon.
Right, boys. We'll talk.
In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Joined now by Rob Willams, the national sports editor of the Daily Hive and its Offside Sports vertical. And happy anniversary, incidentally, to Offside, Rob. I saw your posts there. Rob, the hockey guy on Twitter, but more Rob, the Olympic guy these days. We'll get to that in a moment. But last time, Rob, you were admonished on Seat Beat. We count on you. This community relies on your reportage on what is happening with the seats at Rogers Arena, buddy. So why don't you give us the update that you have on the Rogers Arena seats?
Where will our asses be in the regular season?
What color will our asses be sitting on come the regular?
Yes, guys, I like you put me to shame last time, and I had to get to work. I was like, okay, I need to find out whatever I can find. I've reached out to Canucks PR a couple times, didn't get any information there yet. There's all the talk about the soccer drones and everything lately. I've had spies working in Rogers Arena for years, and it's been underreported. So I've got my spy looking at Rogers Arena. We had our first concert there in a while, so our first event at Rogers Arena. So I got someone that was in early to kind of see the colors of the seats. There's no change. They've added no extra black seats have been added to Rogers Arena. I looked back because I think we all remembered that they said that they would replace them all this summer. At least that's
Yeah.
how I remembered it. I went back to read the press release. They have promised that they'll replace all of the seats in the next 2 summers, and they were going to get started on this third phase of Rogers Arena renovations this summer. They didn't say they were going to replace the seats this summer. So does that mean they're going to replace half the seats this summer and then the rest next? I don't know what.
In my mind, it was the lower bowl. They were going to do the lower bowl because that's on TV. So in my mind, they were going to do the lower bowl this year and then do the upper bowl the year after, because again, you rarely see that television wise. Surprising. I mean, there's still time. I think you could get it done in a month of work, but
Yeah,
my goodness.
there's still time. I also wonder whether somebody in a powerful place found out how much it was going to cost and went,
That's what I'm thinking.
"What?"
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so I wonder if we're going to see burgundy seats for another season. It's funny though, because I in my mind they were changing all the seats this summer, and that's just what they had announced, and I feel like that's what everyone is kind of talking about. But yeah, I was kind of surprised to go back to the press release from last spring to see. Oh no, wait a minute. Okay, it's next 2 summers. So yeah, wait and see on the black seats.
So I'm just looking at the Rogers Arena schedule of events. So when is going to be our next clue? Is this August 8th, Tyler Childers concert, country music star? Olivia Rodrigo is in there on August 9th. So is that when we might have more information, Rob?
I'll get my country music spies on alert.
Please do.
And he's going to Olivia Rodrigo, so we'll definitely get
Of course he's going to Olivia
definitely,
Rodrigo.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look at that Kid Cudi on the 24th. I've seen him before. He's fun. Okay, great stuff, Rob. Thank you for bringing that most important information to us. Now, the other thing is ticket prices. Boy, I've seen a lot of people musing about ticket prices for the Canucks this upcoming season.
Yeah, this is to pay for the black seats, remember?
That's right. What are Daily Hive readers chiming in with there?
Yeah, so remember when we were talking about the Canucks coming down on ticket resellers and basically revoking their season ticket memberships, for people that they suspected were, effectively just reselling their tickets. And a lot of people kind of were coming to the conclusion of like, why are they interested in doing that all of a sudden? And a lot of people were coming to the conclusion that, okay, they can get more for they can jack up the prices to a new season ticket holder or for single game tickets. And that second part is definitely come true. We had a look when single game tickets went on sale recently. You couldn't get a single game seat that wasn't a resale ticket price for under $109. That was the cheapest price. So Columbus on a Tuesday night, or insert non-desirable team on a Monday, 109 was the cheapest. Now you can find cheaper prices on the resale market, and that just speaks to season ticket holders and quarter season pack members get their tickets at a cheaper price, so they're able to actually undercut the single game pricing by quite a margin. But that just shows you how expensive tickets are. And I've heard people say, well, it's inflation, it's this and it's that. In 1 year, they've skyrocketed. The price for a game last season, let me just pull it up here, was in the $50 range. It was
Really?
I'll find you the exact price.
Well, they had
there.
student nights as well, because I know my daughter would periodically go with her boyfriend on student
Right.
nights.
Yeah. And
No,
of course,
$48 was the cheapest ticket you could get last season. So that's for their regular price tier, which is the lowest tier that they have. And like I say, those are the least desirable games. That's not going to get you in for Toronto Maple Leafs or anything like that. But last year you could get in for under $50, and now you can't get in for under $100. That's quite an explosion of prices in a year over year sample. So they really, I do wonder, you know, like I think the Canucks are a playoff team next year. I think they're going to be good, but like they might not be. Like I think they might be jumping the gun here a little bit on really having their their ticket prices skyrocket.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like they were waiting for finally a good season, and then the next thing you know, here comes the jump in ticket price. And look, we say it all the time, and we can bemoan ticket prices all we want, and bemoan the fact that you're pricing a lot of families and a lot of people in this community out of the building, particularly given the cost of living in Vancouver. And yet, if you're getting 18.5 a night, right, as an operator, as a capitalist, you go, well, the demand is there at the prices that we set. Okay. Bob?
Just one other thing, just before we move on, guys. The other thing I discovered is that there are more Leafs. There's going to be more Leafs tickets available for single game seats this year because they didn't make the Leafs game available to quarter season ticket members. First time ever I've ever seen that before, where you know when you're picking your ticket packs as a quarter season ticket pack member, you get 4 different packs to choose from, right? And they're packs of 10, 11 games. In those packs this season, you even pick your playoff games at that moment. You get playoff games, 1 for each round. So every possible playoff game was listed in the ticket packs. Both preseason games at Rogers Arena were listed in the ticket packs, and 40 of 41 home games were listed in the ticket packs. The only one was the Toronto Maple Leafs game, and of course, that is the one ticket that is in a price category of its own. It's higher than every other game. So of course, as we know with like the single game prices, they can now offer more games because you're not getting all these quarter season ticket members snapping those up.
So it's just season ticket holders and single game ticket buyers. That's the only people that will be in the audience.
Half season ticket members, half season ticket members, they had it offered as well. But but none of the quarter season ticket members.
And Rob is correct to bring this up because we have heard in the past, people in the past who have the quarter game pack with the Leafs ticket and basically resell the Leafs ticket as a way to underwrite the rest of the other 9 or 10 games that they do go to, knowing they can get several times over face value for the Leafs ticket. That is good intel, Rob. That's a keen eye. Okay, that is really well done. I know we admonished you on SeatBeat a couple of weeks ago. We got to give you your flowers on this one. Amazing job. Another amazing job has been Rick Westhead and his investigative journalism for TSN over the years. I mean, we're talking about a guy who unearthed the Chicago Blackhawks scandal, gained the trust of Kyle Beach and other victims there, and was able to tell that story holistically, perhaps to the chagrin of Gary Bettman and the Chicago Blackhawks, but to the benefit of hockey and the NHL writ large. He is getting absolutely raked over the coals by some, I would say, misguided soccer fans who seem to think that he's the reason why Canada is down 6 points and missing coaches at the Olympic Games in Paris. What have you noticed on that front, Rob?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Rick Westhead, I think he has the absolute respect of everyone in our industry. Like the stories he's on, the information he's uncovered and the stories he's told have been some really important ones that delve out of the comfort zone of a lot of sports journalists, right? So there's that, and so if there's ever a guy that deserves the benefit of the doubt and deserves the absolute respect, it's Rick Westhead, right? Normally I just kind of ignore like the fringe crazy opinions on social media, but this one's kind of hard to ignore. Like there are, I would imagine this still has to be a minority view. Like I think the majority of people are in the corner of like that, he's doing great reporting on this story, but there you look at the replies in and a lot of these whether it has to do with Rick Westhead's reporting or not, just people just slamming Rick Westhead that he's gone out, he's trying to make a name for himself to bury the Canadian soccer team. Like, absolutely ridiculous. Like, I I don't know how much we want to talk about this, but it's just like to me it was too hard to ignore. I started getting in the arguments on Twitter, which I normally stay out of. But
well, the devil's advocate
Normally
opinion is that he's uncovering a quote unquote scandal that seems like a scandal to the vast majority of us, but to the soccer community, where they feel like this activity is widespread and unanimously used,
But Blake,
that they think that it's not a story.
that is the shout of every single person who gets caught spying. We saw that with the University of Michigan last year. We saw that with the New England Patriots at some time. This is talked about when sign stealing or signaling comes in baseball. That is the go-to defense of everybody caught cheating.
No, but Tyler Adams, U.S. men's national team player who has no skin in this game whatsoever, on record today saying everybody does this. This is a non-story. And this is a competing federation saying he has no problem with what's been happening.
So when there's a 93-mile no-fly zone around Paris because of security for the Olympics, and you fly a drone into
that's a different angle.
That's a story, I'm afraid, Kyle.
That's a different angle, though.
And I think maybe it'd be slightly different if he had just gone digging on this story on his own. But there's only one country that had a member, an unaccredited member of the staff or not. There's only one team that had someone arrested in France, and that is the Canadian team, and that's what sparks all of this. So, I get that we'd love for Rick Westhead to uncover this in every country, but it's his contacts are in Canada. He's done reporting on Canada soccer before. Like, that's obviously where this is going to begin, and where his expertise is going to come in. It's going to be on Canada soccer.
It sounds like the Canadian program was sophisticated, long-standing, and to the point where Bev Priestman is asking about someone who fails to comply with it, what can be done from an HR point of view. And, to the non-story part, used to tell this to players I covered. The second your name appears on a public document, a police blotter, a legal file, what have you, at that point, you have no choice.
But that's not about cheating, Matt. You're conflating two different stories. That's a story about them breaking the the banning of the airspace. That's a different story. That's the criminal part.
What is escaping the people who say non-story about that side of it, though, would be my response.
Because the FIFA does not control the criminal airspace element story.
It's against FIFA rules too, Blake.
What's that?
It's against FIFA rules as well.
Yes, it is.
So it's a story on two prongs.
Yeah.
Number one, the cheating side of things, which, whether it happens all the time or not, is specifically banned by the governing federation. And then the French legal side of things, where you were stupid enough, abjectly stupid enough, to fly a drone over what was the most secure airspace the world over.
The third level of criticism that we're hearing, guys, too, is, hey, great that you're doing this. Great that you care enough to act as quickly as you did on this. But why can't you act as quick on allegations of abuse, on other really critical stories? Why do you drag your feet and try to cover up those sorts of stories? And yet on this, which in the big scheme of things, again, this is not Ben Johnson doping. The athletes aren't directly being affected here. Why are you so quick to act here? It is, you can't blame bureaucracy in one conversation, and then all of a sudden, boy, bureaucracy works so quickly here.
I do think that the thing that's interesting about this story, and I know today's match against Colombia is, probably going to be played when most people are listening to this podcast, but I do see the shift now where everyone's ready to rally behind the players, especially after that win against France. And boy, oh boy, if they could go on a run here now, I think they become like a lovable underdog and just sort of like them against the world sort of thing. And I think people will, this will shift in terms of being ashamed of Canada soccer into just falling in love with the women's team all over again. If they can make a run here in Paris.
Despite the failed appeal, I think there is broad support for the notion that these players have been unreasonably punished for the actions of their superiors who should have known better. And, the second thing I'll say, you're absolutely right, Blake. Good shout. Why don't you act as quickly on other matters and other matters that are more important and involve harm, be it physical, emotional, or psychological to human beings. I mean, I guess the retort in this one is it was a pretty open and shut case. I mean, like the French police showed up in the guy's Olympic room and he just spilled. I mean, he just clucked all his way. I let him know everything that was going on. So I think this was, Blake, and I know you hate the phrase, but for the French police, this was a tidy piece of business. Pretty.
Like Jim Rutherford was in
Not a lot of
charge.
gum chewing was involved here. Rob, marvelous stuff. Thank you, my friend. I look forward to seat beat update next time we speak.
Good stuff. Thanks, guys.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.